And I need to tell you, next Sunday, I am really looking forward to next Sunday when Joel Penton will be here. Joel was a member of the 2002 National Championship Ohio State football team. This is his promo pick. You see what it is, right? He's number 98, and Mr. Chad Henne's number 7. He played for Blue, or as we call them, TTUN, that team up north. So he's going to be here next weekend. Listen, number one, I'm just excited to have him here. Number two, what a great opportunity. If you have a friend who loves football and loves, especially college football, please invite them. I'm going to be inviting our neighbor who has just moved in behind us, and so just looking forward to that. And I hope that you will be here next week for that, because that is going to be great. But this morning we're going to conclude our series that we've called Tug of War. And if this is your first Sunday with us, this is coming out of what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, where he says, "No one can serve two masters, because one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and you'll despise the other." And if you're wondering who we're talking about, Jesus says, we're talking about God and money. You can't love both. You're only going to love one and hate the other one. There's this tug of war. And one of the battlegrounds, by the way, the tug of war isn't with you and with God and your money. The tug of war is between God and Satan, but Satan has this strategy that has worked so well that he just doesn't have to change it. He uses our stuff against us. And so one of the battlegrounds in this tug of war for your heart is in this area of your stuff. And each year we talk about this and what the Bible has to say about it. And I tend to talk about it at the end of the year because we are in the most generous part of the year. I don't know if you recognize this or if you've ever heard this before. For instance, last year for Halloween, we spent $6.9 billion here in the United States on Halloween, all right? For Thanksgiving, we spent an additional $2.4 billion. And on Christmas, it was estimated that last year we spent we spent over $640 billion as Americans in October, November, and December. And beyond that, so if you're ever wondering, those are big numbers. Beyond that, we know Christmas is a great exaggerator. So whatever you feel, the rest of the year, it just the volume gets turned up in the month of December. So if you're normally a happy person the rest of the year, man, during December, you're driving everybody crazy because the volume, you're just really happy at Christmas time. And if you feel lonely most of the year, for some reason at Christmas, it just dials up and you feel really lonely at Christmas time. But it's also true that it gets turned up in the area of our finances. And if you feel out of control most of the year when it comes to the area of your finances, guess what you'll really feel at Christmas time? And part of it, I think, is because you're expected to spend money you already don't have. Right? And I've shared with you my personal goal for everyone here at MCC. So if this is your first Sunday here, I want to make sure you get this. But what I want for you as we go through this Christmas season is for you to experience a financially stress-free Christmas, which, by the way, so if you've been here, you know what this means. A financially stress-free Christmas means that what are you not worried about from December 26th on? Right, paying for Christmas, because you've already paid for it. You saved up and you spent what you saved up. You're not worried about January's bills coming in because there won't be any for Christmas. That's what it means. So getting your finances in order and having the money for Christmas before it actually happens. Now, by the way, that's just financially stress-free. That doesn't say family stress-free, because I can't. That's another series. So I just want to make sure that you know, because some people are under the illusion that pastors don't struggle in the areas of life where everyone else struggles. And just so you know, our family has not always been great about this. Every year, we would overspend at Christmas, and it was mostly because someone in our family gets all hyped up about Christmas and just would not stop spending. We have always had a budget we always knew what we were supposed to spend. We do save up all year long. But Sandy would tell you that we struggled with a user error with the budget each year. It's an ID 10T user error. Typically, the ID10T user error is in the area of computers at our house. There's someone who has that error typically, but it slipped into our Christmas spending because I just kept buying things. And before we leave, I'm going to tell you here in just a little bit, I'm going to tell you how we ended up not doing that. And so you can put that into practice if you want to. But some people go into December feeling like they're in a free fall. And I'm going to remind you of why that is. Part of why that is because half of us spend more money than we make. Just the rest of the year anyway. We just spend more than we make, all right? It's called debt, credit cards, loans, those kind of things. But we spend more than we make. And 1 out of 5 of us who have debt, we believe we'll never pay it off. Which means we go into Christmas and we just add more debt to it because we're not going to get rid of it anyway. So what's the harm? We're just going to extend how long we're going to be paying for it. We'll never get rid of it. Dr. Norman Vincent Peale said this. He said, with the possible exception of health problems, so this would be the top, financial difficulties weigh more heavily on people's minds than anything else. Now, you're the only one who knows if that's true in your family or in your life. If other than health, really finances sit at the top. So this tug of war, by the way, has been all about how to position ourselves to be where we want to be in our finances, not just for Christmas and not just for now, but for the rest of our lives so that we can even help change the trajectory of our kids' lives and their children's lives. We just want to change our family tree when it comes to finances, especially if looking backwards, you can see where your family has struggled with finances. I love this quote. Lewis Dunnington said, "You'll never leave where you are until you decide where you would rather be." So that's what we're encouraging you. Think about where you want to be with your finances. I like Beverly Sills said this, there is no shortcut to any place that's worth going. Okay, you can't, listen, the process to get you back on track, no shortcut. So we take time to talk about finances every year because this is a trap for so many people, has been for us. For Sandy and I, we have been making different decisions now for about the last 10 years because we changed how we think about this area of finances. I like what Dave Ramsey said. He said, what I found is that personal finance is 80% behavior. Everybody tries to fix finance problems with math. It's not a math problem. And it's not a knowledge problem. So it's not about adding and subtracting. It's not even about knowing what's right and what's wrong. It's a behavior problem. What he says is if he could get the guy in the mirror to behave, he could be rich and skinny, right? And so we recognize that too. The thing is, it's not easy. And the question really isn't, is it easy? The question is it worth it? But to find out if it's worth it, we'd have to ask the 22-year-old who in the last year paid off his truck and is debt-free and is now saving for a house, 22 years old. Or the young couple who's about to pay off $60,000 in student loan debt. Or the couple who paid off a $14,000 car and $9,000 in student loans. They still have $41,000 to pay off in school loans, but they have this plan in place because they've been thinking about this. They have this plan to pay all of that off in a year and a half. The couple who paid off over $75,000 in car debt, credit card debt, and other consumer debts in the last 5 years. Listen, those are folks you worship with. It's not just people somewhere in the world. These are people here who have made those kind of decisions and are moving ahead at that kind of speed. So today, if that encourages you as we wrap up this series, I thought it would be good if we as a congregation had the opportunity to draw a line in the sand. If we just said to ourselves, you know what? We are not going to listen to our culture anymore when it comes to finances because we've been getting messed up listening to that. We're going to listen to what God's word has to say, and we're going to start doing things differently when it comes to our finances. I'm going to bet you've heard these words before in Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. Have you heard that before? In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Do you know what that's tied to? Look at the next verse. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all of your crops. Isn't it interesting? This whole leaning not on your own understanding actually ties into, and always has tied into, finances. And so what we're going to do this morning, as we finish this up, is we're going to look at 6 commitments that if you will make these, this is all goes back to God's plan for handling money. He talks about this a ton in the Bible. If you'll do these things, I'm telling you, you will be in a different place than you are right now. I like this quote. Dave Ramsey says this: how you handle or mishandle your money tells all of us who you are, but more importantly, it tells you who you are and who you belong to. So, you ready? These are on your notes. If you haven't pulled it out yet, check this out on your notes. Very top. Commitment number 1. I will acknowledge daily that 100% of my resources belong to God. Everything that I have, everything that I am, everything that I will have, everything that I will be, all of that belongs to God. If we are going to trust God with how to handle our finances, it begins with realizing it already belongs to Him anyway. God says this in Psalm chapter 50. He said, I own the world and everything in it. He doesn't stumble, He doesn't stutter, He doesn't guess. He just tells us it all belongs to Him. So if you're wondering, that's His mindset on this. I asked Rick and Barb Melton to share about this. And so here's a picture of Rick and Barb, and they said this. 2 Corinthians 9:7 says, God loves a cheerful giver. We have to admit that we've not always been cheerful givers. When Barb and I finally pondered that verse together, we were up to our necks in credit cards, because as boomers, baby boomers, we were part of the initial credit card generation when you thought that when you got the Sears card, man, if you were okay to get one of those, you had it made. I don't know if you were ever part of that where you thought, oh man, they trust me with the credit card. This is awesome. He says, we were first blessed by God in MCC to attend our first Financial Peace University course. I say first because we had to take it twice. We reluctantly embraced a number of the principles taught. The one that had the most impact for us was that God owns all of it, but doesn't expect us to give it all. If we give 10% back to God, we would be blessed. Being self-employed in real estate sales, that was a pretty steep leap when you're writing that check and you're looking at a mound of credit card bills and wondering where your next check is going to come from. Not to mention where the money's going to come from for food and house payments and clothes for the children and college and on and on and on. But we did it. We took this leap of faith, and believe it or not, God has blessed us. We paid off all of our credit cards. He blessed us with being able to pay all the family bills and still be able to do fun things with the family. There were times we would write that check grimacing and think about where the next check was going to come from, but the phone would ring and it would come. God has blessed us with peace of mind. God has blessed us with good health and great kids and good parents and wonderful grandchildren and granddogs, and are able to contribute back to God in other ways that God leads MCC to do for this community and other parts of the country and around the world. It's a leap of faith, giving back a small portion of what God already owns and to be blessed by a loving God in so many ways. But that's where it begins. It begins with this recognition that, you know what, everything I have already belongs to Him. It's not mine, belongs to Him. So what does He want me to do with it? Here's commitment number 2. It's on your notes. I will eliminate all debt from my life, and I will live debt-free from now on. William Cyrus said, debt is the slavery of the free. Think about that. Debt is the slavery of the free. Proverbs 22 says it like this: the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. We asked Tommy and Stacy Fox, one of our young couples here, to talk about this. Check out what they said.
We're Tommy and Stacy Fox.
And we're debt-free.
Perfect.
Is that good?
That's good.
That was stupid. That was stupid. I should have stopped.
You want to do it again?
Yes.
That was my best take ever.
We'll do another one for him.
Okay.
We'll give him his options.
Okay.
We're Tommy and Stacy Fox.
And we're debt-free. Is that one better?
I like it. It'll be on a blooper reel regardless.
Yes.
Either way, it's gonna get in there somehow.
I kind of feel like it needs to be said that trust in God through this process, and He'll lead you through it. God wants the best for His people, and including being debt-free. He never wants us to be in debt. So, trust in the Lord, and He'll take care of you.
Yeah, and I would say that it's hard to do the things that God puts on your heart when you're constantly making payments and paying people money, and being able to trust His provision in that. And sometimes it's challenging and it's hard, but ultimately we believe it's His money, and He wouldn't want his people to be in debt, and we kind of go by the verse that the borrower is slave to the lender, and they'll tell you that when you don't make the payment because they're going to come knocking. And then, so yeah, just knowing and trusting that God will provide and stay diligent, and that, you know, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it.
This whole process has affected our marriage definitely in a positive way.
Yeah.
We've become more at peace with our money, with our finances, budgeting and communicating, and
I feel like money affects like every decision in your life. Like it touches your priorities, your faith, your, you know, how you interact, the things you do. Like it's every piece of your life is touched by money at some point. And so being on the same page with our money, like I see a lot of my friends struggle with, you know, their spouses because they're have different priorities, or they have spending things that they like to do, and there's tension and argument. So for us, it's like, wow, yeah, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that because that's too stressful for me.
Earl Wilson said this. He said there are 3 classes of people. You're going to fall into one of these 3. So just sort of figure out which one you are. He said 3 classes of people: the haves, the have-nots, and the have not paid for what they haves. You're in one of those 3. And Tommy and Stacy will tell you, listen, did you hear them say it was hard work? You're going to hear everyone say that. It's hard work, but it's worth it. So at Christmas, here's what we did. If you're looking for what we did, and you can do this too. Number one, I want to make sure you know this. We set a spending budget for Christmas, and that was set it was early in the year. And then we saved all year long. And then we bought a money card with our Christmas money. So for the kids that our kids, we bought a card, and we bought their gifts on it, and then whatever was left on that card, we gave the card to the kids, and they got to use that for whatever they wanted. Nothing was bought for Christmas that year that was not on those cards. What could I not do? Do you remember the story at the beginning? What could I not do? If everything that we were buying was on this card, what could I not do? I couldn't overspend. It's not possible if you do that, all right? So that's just an idea. You don't have to do it that way. That's just an idea if you're looking for something, all right? Here's commitment number 3, by the way. It's on your notes. I will assign every dollar a name in a monthly budget. I will spend my money on paper on purpose before the month begins. All right, this is called a budget. So check the truth of this quote. You must gain control over your money, or the lack of it will forever control you. And if right now you've got this sick feeling, then you know the negative side of that, right? Either you control it, or the lack of your control, it'll forever control you. Which, by the way, just reflects what Proverbs tells us. Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Pay careful attention to your herds. That is, know what you have, know how much you have coming in, and know what you're doing with all of it. When I was talking to Craig Ketron, who's one of our guys here, I asked him to talk about this. That's Craig in the middle, by the way, not one of the 2 young ladies on the side. And he said this: preparing a monthly budget has put me in a position to better understand where I was, where I am, and where I can be in regards to my finances. Budgeting has actually given me better control of money. Said I started working with a budget about 2.5 years ago. Before that, I did a lot of guesswork as far as where I spent money, how much was being applied to my needs versus my wants, how much was simply being just blown on frivolous things. Currently, I have a working budget that I monitor monthly, gives me the ability to prioritize what my money is being spent on. I've been able to free up funds and redirect them to tithing, paying debt, saving for the future, and spending on those frivolous things that I enjoy. Did you catch that last sentence? Still able to spend on those. He just knows how much he has to do that with. Through the power of budgeting, I can see that I'm about 8 months from paying off all of my debts, with the exception of my mortgage. But that includes a substantial business loan I took out years ago. He writes, of course, I'm excited about being debt-free. However, the biggest benefit I'm looking forward to is being free from the worry and the stress that having debt causes. This didn't happen overnight. But with a little hard work, dedication, and sacrifice, you can build a budget that works for you too. And it will help you know what your path, that's all a budget is. It's a path that points you where you want to go and tells you how long it's going to take to get there. Larry Burkett said this: a budget is simply telling your money where to go rather than wondering where it went. So I hope, listen, the idea of a budget. Number 4, commitment number 4, I will train my children to handle money God's way. I will train my children. These things that we're talking about, that we're putting into practice, I'm going to make sure my kids know this. I'm going to hand this down. It's just what Proverbs 22 talks about. Train a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not turn from it. The Message version of this verse says, point your kids in the right direction, and when they're old, they won't be lost. They might wander off the path from time to time, but they always know where the path is, and they'll keep coming back to it. Jared Haynes teaches our Financial Peace University class, and I asked he and his wife, Justine, if they would, to talk about how they're passing this on to their girls. So check this out.
I'm Justine.
I'm Jared.
We've been married for 11 years. We have 2 kids, Riley and Savannah, and they're 7 and 4. Most important thing I want people to know is how invaluable it is for your kids to understand how money works. Because in order for us to change how things go forth in our family from now on, they need to understand when they get older that debt isn't an option. They need to understand how to handle their money, how to budget at an early age, so that when they move out on their own, they can take care of themselves and they can take care of their household, and they don't get out there and go, a budget? What's that? And feel confused and lost and end up getting in trouble and back where we were when we were scared and lost and angry and frustrated, because we don't want them to experience that. And by starting them early and teaching them how to budget and teaching them how to save, it helps prevent that from happening when they're later down the road.
And it's never too late as a parent to start teaching your kids about money. And the parents shouldn't have a fear of teaching their children about money. If you're starting later and they're teens, then it's a good opportunity to go ahead and start developing a work ethic. So when you start earlier, then you have a better foundation and a better understanding of how money works, and so that they have just an overall better concept. And again, parents shouldn't fear about teaching their kids about money. Money's not evil.
All right, so part of what we need to understand, because I don't know how many of your parents talked to you about money. My parents did not teach me anything about it. What I learned, I was from watching them, and for us to be intentional about that. Thornton Wilder said this: money is like manure. It isn't worth a thing unless it's spread around, encouraging young things to grow. And I love saying that, number one, because it reminds us that we are to be passing this on to the next generation. I also love saying it because I get to say manure, and you don't get to do that very often from up front. So, commitment number 5 on your notes. You ready? I will save and invest my money building wealth slowly through consistent, wise decisions. In other words, I will live on less than what I bring in. In other words, I will not spend every penny I make. It goes back to probably the greatest question, the best question I've ever been asked when it comes to finances, which is how much of your income do you want to live on? And early on, we talked about this last week, right? My thought, maybe your thought, when I'm asked is how much do you want to live on? The obvious answer is what? All of it, of course. Right? That's what it's there for, right? To live on and get the stuff you want. That's why we make all that, so we can spend all of that. But if you spend everything that you make, what do you have for emergencies, right? So we need to be careful. We need to ask this question well. Proverbs 13 says, money that comes easily disappears quickly, but money that is gathered little by little will grow. Here's what I think. Outside of tithing, this is probably the most difficult thing for us to wrap our minds around. How can we possibly set anything aside? So I've asked Melissa and Kelly DeWine to come on out. If you guys would come on out and share their story about how they've done this. Because where you are now is not where you began, right?
Right.
You started in a whole different place. Could you even imagine back then? Could you even imagine being kind of where you are now?
No.
Okay, good. If you would.
I am Melissa DeWine, and this is my husband, Kelly. And we married in 1989, and we both had full-time jobs with decent salaries. About 6 months into the marriage, I decided it would be a great thing to open a popcorn store. And that's kind of where it all started. We continued to live as if we had 2 incomes, and I didn't. have a full-time income. So some years were good, some were bad. We were not attending church during that time. We were just going about life trying to pay the bills. In 2003, we started attending MCC, and we are all in. So MCC offered the Dave Ramsey course, and we decided to take that. We sat through that class with our mouths shut because we didn't want anyone to know what shape we were in. We had a credit card that we had allowed to get really big. So while we didn't follow it perfectly, we decided that credit card is closed, we're going to pay that off. We started tithing before the credit card was paid off because we felt that that was important. So it took us several years, but we got that paid off. While we were tithing, we started saving. And that is an amazing feeling to have your first Christmas where there's no debt at the end of it. So Kelly got a different job. He has a second job. The popcorn store has started to do really well, and it's a whole new world because we are being faithful. It's not always been easy. Our oldest son has had 6 surgeries with a 7th one coming up next month, but we've been able to use our emergency fund to pay our portion that insurance doesn't cover. Our youngest son was involved in a traffic accident that wasn't his fault, but his car was totaled, and we were able to pay cash for a new car. Well, not a new car, a nice used car. So because we had that savings, it didn't stress us out. So the bottom line in being faithful is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. So Kelly and I know even if this season of financial blessing is taken from us, that we are being prospered because we're following God's plan for our lives.
Thanks.
Oh, I don't need to be that. Okay.
So did they start where they are now? No. Was it easy? No. Okay. Again, but are you noticing that when you hear people talk about stuff, that you're hearing the same words over and over again? We trusted God. We decided that we needed to begin tithing. We started figuring out where our money was going. We began to figure out how to, even though it was hard, we wanted to save some. All of these things, listen, they all weave together. It's all part of one plan. This is not a la carte. You don't pick and choose. You start trusting God with this stuff, which, by the way, is the last commitment. I will give a tithe of my income back to God, trusting Him to meet my daily needs. This is the idea of tithing. And, by the way, tithing is about the idea of trusting God, all right? So he talks about this all the way back in the Old Testament in Malachi, which is where we share this a lot. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty. And if you want, read this word trust. Trust me in this, because that's really what tithing is about. See if you'll trust me, and just watch me open the floodgates of heaven. And when I do that, I'm going to pour out so much blessing that you will not have enough room for it. Listen, this is what this is about. When we talk about, if we're going to do things God's way, that means we have, not only do we say, yeah, okay, it all belongs to Him, we have to actually trust Him by putting into motion what we say we believe. So we asked Chris and Christine Parlett to talk about this. Check out what they had to say.
We are Chris and Chris Parlett, and we've been married 16 years.
What everyone should understand about tithing is that it's not necessarily a number. I mean, it is quote unquote the 10%, but the focus should be on trusting God with your earnings and trusting that if you faithfully give, that everything will work out. He's going to look after you, and everything will work out. It has been that way for us. It's been that way for everyone I've ever spoken with, that if they faithfully tithe, then they don't have money problems. They don't have, it's more than money, is frankly what it boils down to. It's a faith and trust practice. We believe and love the church that we attend in MCC and the work that is done here. So when there is extra need, we don't ever hesitate.
We pick up the slack. We do what we need to do. If it's a matter of they need an extra set of hands, we're here volunteering our time. We're here packing shoe boxes into giant cartons, and and when we were starting to learn this, what is this? What does it mean? What would our budget mean with this? And the first couple months we did it, it was kind of like well, let's kind of stick our toe in the water, but let's wait and see what's left over at the end of the month. And it never kind of worked out. And I remember telling him, I don't know how we're going to do this if we do it off the top, like the Bible says, because it's not there at the end of the month. But that's the very first thing. And there's a lot of people that struggle with making that decision. Should I give really a full 10%? Is God really going to know? I can tell you that I have never given that chunk of money to any other cause with a happier and more joyful heart ever. That is the happiest bill I pay every month. And it's the very first thing I do. As soon as his check has been deposited and I see that it's in the checking account, the very next thing I do is click on MCC Give. And I give online, and it's easy and it's quick and it's great for the church. It's great for us, and it just so simple.
And I would say for those that are struggling with the decision, don't let guilt drive the decision. Faith has to drive the decision. And we were actually, I remember the conversation. We were in the van on the way to church on 122 when we were having this conversation. And it was like, well, we just got to do it. And when you take that leap of faith, before you know it, you're in a rhythm that becomes the base. And what I mean by the base, that's all you know. And then, yes, you may have to tweak things in life that you find aren't that important. But it's in that initial leap of faith, not guilt, that makes all the difference in the world. Because you will see God's work in front of you.
So here's what's funny about that. We didn't ask them to talk about tithing. They're supposed to be talking about budgeting. And they just kept coming back to this. And they said all of that while they were talking about budgeting. And so this whole idea of trust and making sure that I want you to know the things that we talk about with personal budgets as a church, we put these principles into play as well. And so even as we've prepared the budget for 2017, and we'll talk about that at some point, but for you to know, we try to do this. We want to put this, and when it comes to our budget here at MCC, this is one of the areas where we don't do this. We don't set aside 10% for missions. This year, we're actually setting aside 13.3% that will go to missions worldwide, because we believe that God wants us to be faithful with what he has entrusted to us. Martin Luther said it this way: I've held many things in my hands and I've lost them all. But whatever I've placed in God's hands, that's what I still possess. So we believe this is the foundation. This is where it all begins. And so last week, I put in your hands this form. And if you did not bring it back, if you weren't here last week, we put it in your hands again this week. On one side is a letter. On the other side, it talks about this idea of a tithing challenge. So the idea is this: if you already tithe, if you already give 10% of your income back to God through MCC, just check the top thing. If you will start tithing faithfully to God through MCC, and the tithing challenge, you don't really need that, then just check the second box. But if you have been thinking about this and you're a little concerned about the finances of this thing, because 10% of your income is a lot, okay, when you talk about setting that aside. But if you will tithe for 90 days, I want to make sure that you read this whole thing, because we want to confirm your giving during those 90 days. But if you will tithe during those 90 days, and the dates are there, doesn't begin today, it begins next Sunday, and it goes through February 18th. But if you will do that, at the end of the 90 days, if you have not seen God at work, all you have to do is tell us that, and we will refund the total amount that you have given. If you tell me on a Sunday morning I can't do it on the spot, I probably won't have it in my pockets. But I will do it. No tricks at all. This is a promise that God has made, and we try. The reason we're okay with doing this is we didn't make the promise. God made the promise. We're just backing it up. And if having that kind of a financial security net helps you, check that third box, and let's start down this path together. Listen, this is why we teach this. God has already entrusted to his kids all the financial resources that we need to accomplish his kingdom's work. And now what he's doing is he's watching to see if his children, who he has entrusted this to, will let go of it. I also know for most people it's not about trust. Typically, people don't withhold giving because of a rebellious spirit or because they have some problem with how the money is managed at the church or a lack of desire. Most people don't do this because they're broke. No father wants his kids to be broke. No dad wants to watch their children struggle that way. That's why these principles are huge. It's huge. My finances have implications beyond me and beyond my family for generations. Yours does too. Here's the thing. You want to win the tug of war in this area of your life? You pull the way God is pulling. You get on his side of the rope and you start pulling. Because I'm telling you right now, you do not want to pull against God. You can't pull against God. And it's not because you can't pull harder than him. It's because he won't pull against you. Because he loves you. He will not pull against his own child. And I hope you will hear this. He's always been pulling for you. And so this morning, we're coming to the end of the message. We're coming to where we talk about next steps, and we want to tie it into our communion and offering time today, because what we're talking about, the decisions you make in this area of your life are all a response to what God has said. And you're either going to say, yes, God, I will trust you with this, or you'll say, I'm just not ready for that yet. But communion reminds us of what God's response is to our sin. He sent his son to die for us because we had a sin debt we could not pay. He paid it for us. And our receiving communion is us bowing our knee to our King. And when we give back in our offering, it's actually an act of obedience to and love toward God. And I want to tell you this, it's an act of rebellion against our enemy. We fight back against our enemy because he's trying to use this area of your life to win your heart. And you fight back when you do this. It is a tug of war. And every week that we receive and every week when we give, we remind ourselves of where we want our heart to be.